Hi, my name's Cara. I'm a recovering compulsive overeater. My abstinence date is 18th of November 2009. I was 27 when I came in. I'm 43 now. And it's been a very beautiful journey. Just a little warning, I have a 5-year-old next to me, so if I'm interrupted, I apologize. Babysitting at 7 o'clock in the morning is quite difficult. Um, so I came into OA, and at that point, I was binging from the moment I woke up till the moment I went to bed. Oh, and Siamese cat as well. And I, as it says, in the big book, the nature of the disease is progressive. Food was always an important part of my life. Um, I liked sweets a lot as a child. I liked big portions, and it featured in a lot of my entertainment as I got older. What was like having fun with my friends at a pajama party and eating pizza and eating ice cream on a Saturday, by the end had turned into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. The days just increased. And the moment that I knew that it was a problem was when I was stealing my housemate's food and I didn't like the food that I was eating. Um, I was full up. I'd binged all day, and then I was eating my housemates. I don't know, it was like tin of sardines or something really not nice. And I thought, this is nuts, like I'm full and I'm eating food that I don't like. And it was just that having to put something into my mouth. And I knew then I was crazy essentially. And um, I found OA and I went to an OA meeting. And although I found what I was doing objectionable, I didn't, my reason for going up to OA was to lose weight. I was horrified with the amount of weight that I was putting on. And I went to that meeting in Bethnal Green, and it was February 2009. And the first meeting was fine. I was really surprised on the second meeting when I was still binging. I thought in that week, I would miraculously stop. But on the second meeting, there was a woman who shared that she didn't have cake and she was really sad about it. And she hadn't had cake for like 20 years or something. And I thought, oh my God, I can't be 20 years in and be sad about not having cake. And I went out and I did another diet and I lost 2 stone. And then I put it all back on after, succumbing to an ice cream or something. And then I came back in the September 2009. Um, and at that point, um, again, it was just the weight that I was concerned about rather than anything else. And so when I had a sponsor, I pretended to write some sort of food plan to her, but actually tried to diet essentially, because I thought I have to lose the weight before I do the steps. I can't just eat normally. And and that was my journey for 14 months. In the first 14 months of OA was absolute insanity, um, incapacity to do the food plan, well, willingness to do the food plan essentially. And it took me, I started the steps, and it wasn't until I was on step 7. Luckily, I had a sponsor who would sponsor me, even though I wasn't abstinent. And I needed that because on step 7, the denial shifted, and this idea of weight fell from me, like this idea that I had to be thin. And it was important because all of a sudden I could see like how insane it was to put the desire to be thin over the desire to be sane.
That's
And
5 minutes.
thank you. And what I found objectionable was the amount of time that I spent thinking about food. I was thinking about food like literally all the time at work, in conversations with family, at events. And I thought that I am literally going to go mad if I carry on like this. And I became willing to do a food plan when I was on step 7, and that was 14 months into OA. And it was a very rigid food plan. It had weighed and measured, and there was like no room for even an extra raspberry or anything. Um, and I needed that because I needed to learn how to eat. Um, and I did that for 18 months. And then in 2009, I also met a sponsor in another fellowship and started working the steps. And he introduced me to the big book. And okay, no, he remained my sponsor for a very long time. And what I learned in there was the mental obsession. Now, when I learned about the mental obsession, I was terrified because it said at certain times we are unable, not we were unable. So I knew if I didn't say spiritually fit, one day that thought that is always going to be there of it's a good idea to mess about with food. And for me, it would probably be dieting that then would lead to binging. Um, I wouldn't have protection from that. I was speaking to someone this week and I said there's that film, what's it called, Inside Out, where there's the like little creatures inside the head or like giving instructions, and there's one locked up overeater who's constantly ready to go eat, 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 or diet, diet, diet. And if I don't work my spiritual program, that gate is opening and he's pressing that button, and I won't have any control over that. And and so by the grace of God, I finished the steps. I learned about the insanity. And one thing that was good about the program that I was in, you had to sponsor when you were on step 3. So I sponsored from 2009. And that has been my saving grace because the food plan shifted after about 18 months. That one of the things about being in the food plan was you had to eat. Um, uh, Actually, I'll start with this. I knew that I needed God more than I needed a food plan because it said like one egg. And I went to a supermarket one day and they had an extra large packet of eggs and I was delighted. And I thought, how nuts is that? Is that I'm getting like tiny bit extra egg and I'm really happy about it. If they had like a really big apple, I would choose the really big apple. So the desire for more food was still there, even with like the strictest food plan. And I thought, what OA offers is that goes away, that I'm not looking for extra large eggs, that I'm fine with whatever's on my plate. And I started to pray, and it terrified me to make food fuel because, I wanted food to be fun still. Um, and then one of the rules was that you had to eat 3 cups of veg in your evening meal. And although this was great in the beginning because it taught me to eat more where I had been very restrictive, I live in London. Sometimes I'm home very late due to work, and eating 3 cups of veg at like 8:45 at night is really not fun. And I felt like that was uh, mad again. And then one day I was walking around with my family trying to find this 3 cups of veg on a family trip, and I was more mad than I was in my uh, obsession. I was like, I need to find a restaurant that has 3 cups of veg. And I think we walked around for half an hour. And then at the end of that trip, well, that half an hour, I said, let's just go to McDonald's. No interest in McDonald's, but I just knew that food had to lose its power completely. And I could like stop it. And I started intuitively eating. And it was I mean, it was like a journey, but it's what program is about
That's
for me, is
temporal.
the dependence on God. Thank you. Um, and it was a slow burner, my OA recovery. It was, I think it took like 5 years to leave food on the plate. But when I did, I was like, oh my goodness, like I'm full. And I, and the most important thing essentially is that I don't think about food in between meals. I eat everything. I and I don't want those other foods. Like, so if I can have dessert, I 9 times out of 10, I don't have the dessert because I don't feel like it. I mean, that's a miracle. I know it's not for everyone, so I'm just saying this is just my journey. Um, and so, you know, how that has come about is through there's a line that says like walking in the spirit. My spiritual fitness is really important. It's like going to the gym, like if you don't exercise, then, I've had boyfriends with six packs. If they don't go to the gym for like 2 weeks, it's gone. And my six pack my is dependent on how often I exercise it. And for me that, I read a hell of a lot of spiritual literature. I do set prayers in the morning, which are really important because they're written by other people and they don't necessarily say things that I would um, come up with myself. It's been very helpful. And I wrote a quote actually, and it says, obedience is not walking in the law or walking in willpower or walking in good deeds. It's not a moral program. And I can't just do what my sponsor says, it has to, my duty as a sponsor, I can't get anyone abstinent. Like having a good sponsor is not going to get you abstinent. Nothing is going to get you abstinent apart from surrender, your relationship with God, and actually doing everything that you can do within your own power. And that's not like with the food, it's actually like getting to the meetings, doing the service, um, doing your prayers, doing your meditation. These are all within your own power. In the big book, it says we spend much of our spare time in this effort. I spend a lot of my spare time sponsoring, giving service, and that has saved me through many a stupid decision over the last 16 years. Um, and, I recognize that my job, what it all comes down to is doing God's will. If I deviate from that, then the food thoughts are going to come back.
Two
And
minutes
God,
left, Tara.
thank you. And God's will, I am granted abstinence and freedom so that I can impart it to others in recovery. It's not for fun and for free. There is terms and conditions to my abstinence. But what I can do is, as a sponsor, is help people clear the path of, especially like in the step 4 of where my insanity is blocking me from a higher power. And then my job is to encourage others in their relationship with God and to trust them to listen to that guidance, not to be dependent on me at all. And and it's that simple. It's like that close walk with God throughout the the years and developing that relationship as a result of not only working the steps, but working the traditions, working the concepts, giving service at intergroup. And I'll end on this actually. I recorded my time one weekend and I went to an OA meeting on a Saturday. I saw a sponsee after and I did intergroup, which was 3 hours on a Saturday. And I think all of that took up something like 6 hours. And I thought, oh, this is a lot of service. But then when I looked at it in the concept of the weekend, I went to the cinema with my friends. I went for dinner with my friends. I watched for like 4 hours of The Sopranos. Like it's fine. You can do a lot of service and do a lot of life as well. And it's being really realistic with oneself, how much one can give. And I think by always giving above and beyond what I have, even with when my son was born, I've done 5 meetings this week. Sorry, 16 years in, it's still a priority. And that's where the freedom comes from. But
I
there's a lot of joy, thank you, and life in between the service. It's not separate to my life, it's one with my life.